The champagne flute trembled in my weathered hand as I stood at the microphone. My granddaughter's engagement party stretched before me like a stage set for execution. 200 faces turned toward me, expectant, unknowing. My children sat at the head table, their smiles frozen, suddenly sensing something terribly wrong. I was 68 years old, and my hands told stories no one had ever bothered to read. Each wrinkle carved into my knuckles was a testimony to 4 decades of invisible labor, scrubbing floors while they slept, packing lunches before dawn, mending clothes by lamplight after everyone else had gone to bed. My fingers, gnarled like old tree roots, had built their comfortable lives brick by invisible brick, and now those same hands held the detonator that would destroy everything they'd stolen from me. After 70 years on this earth, I'd built a fortress of silence around myself, constructed carefully with each dismissed opinion, each interrupted sentence, each time my voice was drowned out by someone deemed more important. I'd become a ghost in my own family's story, a shadow figure in the background of their photographs, present but never seen, existing but never acknowledged. The loneliness wasn't the dramatic kind you see in movies. No operatic isolation. It was quieter, more insidious. A slow drift into irrelevance, marked by unanswered phone calls that went from weekly to monthly to never, by birthdays that slipped from their calendars like water through cupped hands, by my name becoming something they said with obligation rather than love. But the deepest wound, the one that still bled when I pressed against it in the darkness of sleepless nights, was discovering that this abandonment hadn't been accidental. There was no gradual, natural drifting apart of busy lives moving in different directions. No, this had been orchestrated, deliberate, calculated with the precision of accountants balancing a ledger. My own children had conspired to erase me, not through neglect, but through malice. They hadn't simply stopped loving me. They'd never loved me at all. I was merely an asset to be liquidated, a resource to be extracted and discarded like or from a mine. Before I continue my story, I'd like to know who's on the other side listening to me. Comment your name and where you're watching from. And check if you're already subscribed to the channel. It helps me so much to keep bringing these real stories to you. Write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. How did I end up here, clutching this microphone like a weapon, about to detonate a bomb of truth in the middle of crystal and roses? Let me take you back to 4 months ago, to the day that shattered the last illusion I'd been clinging to. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late June when I found myself rummaging through cardboard boxes in a storage unit on the edge of town. Not the kind of storage unit for overflow furniture or holiday decorations. The kind you rent when you've been thrown out of your own home, when everything you've accumulated in 7 decades of living has been reduced to 12 boxes in a 10 by 10 concrete cell that smells of rust and desperation. 4 months earlier, my son Marcus and daughter Jennifer had staged what they called an intervention. They'd brought a doctor carefully selected, who'd spent exactly 17 minutes with me before declaring I was experiencing cognitive decline. Never mind that I balanced my checkbook to the penny every month, that I remembered every grandchild's birthday, that I could recite poetry I'd memorized 50 years ago. I'd forgotten where I'd put my reading glasses twice. They were on my head both times. And apparently that was enough evidence to have me declared incompetent. The legal papers appeared within a week, already prepared, as if they'd been drafted months in advance and were just waiting for the flimsiest excuse. Power of attorney. Conservatorship. My signature, shakily applied because my hands were trembling with disbelief, not dementia. And then, with stunning speed, I was out. My house, the house where I'd raised them, where I'd nursed my dying husband, where I'd lived for 42 years, suddenly wasn't mine anymore. They needed to sell it for my care, they said. The money would go into a trust for my benefit, they promised. Within a month, I was living under the Morrison Street Bridge. I never told anyone, not even the other homeless folks who shared that concrete cavern. They knew me as Elle, a woman who appeared at dusk and disappeared at dawn, who kept to herself, who always had a kind word but never a personal story. They didn't need to know that I had children, that I'd once had a home, that this wasn't supposed to be how a life of hard work and sacrifice ended. But that Tuesday in June, I'd managed to access one of my storage boxes. It contained items I'd hidden away in the frantic 3 days between the conservatorship and my eviction, things I'd smuggled out in garbage bags while Marcus and Jennifer were busy cataloging my valuables like pirates dividing plunder. Among the boxes was my late husband Robert's old desk, a massive oak piece that had belonged to his father. I'd saved it from their greedy hands by claiming it was broken, unsalvageable, fit only for the dump. They'd believed me because they'd always believed I was too sentimental about worthless things. As I ran my hands over the familiar wood grain, feeling the scratches and dents of decades of use, my finger caught on something. A seam that shouldn't be there. A panel that moved slightly when pressed. My heart began hammering against my ribs like a prisoner against cell bars. The hidden compartment clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo through the metal storage unit like a gunshot. Inside lay a manila envelope, yellowed with age but sealed tight, and beneath it, a newer envelope, white and crisp, with my name written in Robert's distinctive handwriting. I'm 81 now, and I can still feel the weight of that moment, the way time seemed to compress and expand simultaneously, the way the fluorescent storage unit light suddenly seemed too bright, too harsh, illuminating something that had been hidden in darkness for so long. The white envelope contained a letter dated 3 weeks before Robert died. 6 years ago. My dearest Eleanor, it began, and I could hear his voice, weakened by cancer but still steady with purpose. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I suspect our children have shown their true colors. I've known for years, my love. I've known what they really think of us, what they're planning. I've seen the way they calculate, the way they hover like vultures, counting down the days until inheritance. I've read the text messages they didn't realize I could access. I've heard the phone calls they thought were private. My vision blurred with tears, but I forced myself to keep reading. I've prepared something for you. A second will, one they don't know about, filed with my attorney John Morrison at Morrison & Associates. The house, the investments, the life insurance. It's all in an irrevocable trust with you as the sole beneficiary and trustee. They can't touch it without your consent. I've also documented everything I discovered about their plans. The evidence is in this desk, in this compartment. Use it when you need it. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you while I was alive. I thought perhaps I was being paranoid, seeing shadows where there was only light. But a father knows. Husband knows. Forgive me for leaving you to face this alone, but know that I've armed you for the battle. The manila envelope contained printouts of text messages between Marcus and Jennifer, spanning 3 years, starting from when Robert first got sick. Mom's completely clueless. Once Dad's gone, we can easily get her declared incompetent. She owes me a favor. Marcus, April 2019. We need to move fast after the funeral. Strike while she's grieving and confused. Get the paperwork ready now. Jennifer, June 2019. She's so pathetically grateful for any attention. This is going to be easier than I thought. Marcus, September 2019. Each message was a knife, carefully sharpened, deliberately plunged into my back by the people I'd birthed, nursed, raised, sacrificed everything for. But I still wasn't at the bottom of the betrayal. There was more. A financial analysis Robert had compiled, showing that Marcus and Jennifer had been stealing from him for years, forging checks, using his credit cards, taking out loans in his name. The total, nearly $300,000, bled slowly from a man too sick and too trusting to notice, or perhaps too heartbroken to confront. And there, at the bottom of the manila envelope, was the cruelest document of all, an email from Jennifer to Marcus, dated just 2 months before Robert died. I can't wait for this to be over. Mom's been such a burden my entire life, always needing attention, always playing the martyr. At least once we get the money, we can put her somewhere and forget about her. She'll probably die within a year anyway. Old people do when they're put in homes. Nature's way of cleaning up. I sat on the concrete floor of that storage unit for 3 hours, reading and rereading those words until they were seared into my brain like a brand. The world didn't shatter dramatically, like a window struck by a stone. It cracked slowly, methodically, the way ice spreads across a windshield on a freezing morning, silent but inexorable, each fracture connecting to the next until the whole structure became something too fragile to sustain its own weight. After 70 years on this earth, I'd learned that the deepest pain doesn't announce itself with screams and dramatics. It arrives quietly, settles into your bones like winter cold, and makes itself at home in the hollowed-out spaces where love used to live. I pulled myself up from that floor, my knees protesting, my back aching, my heart somehow still beating despite feeling like it had been carved from my chest with a rusty spoon. And I made a decision. Not impulsively, not emotionally, but with the cold calculation of someone who'd finally understood the rules of the game she'd been playing without realizing it. If my children wanted to treat me like an asset to be liquidated, I would show them what it meant when an asset fought back. The first call I made was to John Morrison, Robert's attorney. The second was to a legal aid society specializing in elder abuse. The third was to a private investigator named Rebecca Torres, who'd helped a friend's mother in a similar situation. What my children didn't know, what they'd been too arrogant and too certain to check, was that their conservatorship had been granted based on fraudulent medical evidence. Rashid had examined me for 17 minutes and declared me incompetent based on Marcus's coaching, and I later discovered a generous consulting fee that Rebecca's investigation uncovered. What they also didn't know was that Robert's trust wasn't just irrevocable. It had specific clauses that would be triggered if anyone attempted to fraudulently claim the assets or have me declared incompetent. The moment those legal papers were filed, a silent alarm had been tripped in John Morrison's office. He'd been waiting, watching, documenting everything my children did. Over the next 3 months, while Marcus and Jennifer believed I was living in some state facility, they never bothered to check which one, never visited, never called. I was actually staying in a modest apartment Rebecca had helped me secure, funded by emergency distributions from the trust. And I was building my case. Rebecca's investigation was thorough and devastating. Marcus had already spent $80,000 of my money on a boat. Jennifer had put a down payment on a vacation condo in Aspen. They told everyone I was being cared for, while they threw parties in my sold house, except the house hadn't actually been sold. They'd rented it out and were pocketing the income, waiting to sell it for maximum profit. The fraud was so blatant, so poorly concealed, that Rebecca actually laughed when she compiled her report. "They're not even trying to hide it," she said. "They think you're invisible. They think no one's watching." That was their fatal mistake. 70 years of being invisible had taught me how to see everything. John Morrison filed for an emergency hearing to vacate the conservatorship. The judge took one look at Dr. Rashid's 17-minute evaluation, compared it to the comprehensive cognitive assessment I'd undergone with 3 independent neurologists, all confirming I was sharp as a tack, examined the financial forensics showing the embezzlement, and his face went from professional neutrality to barely concealed fury. The conservatorship was dissolved, the power of attorney revoked. And then the real hammer fell. Criminal charges for elder abuse, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. But I wasn't done. Not even close. If you're following me so far, leave a comment telling me. Have you also been betrayed by someone you loved? Your story matters to me. I want to read it in the comments. Marcus and Jennifer had been so confident in their scheme, so certain of their superiority, that they'd gotten sloppy in other ways too. Rebecca discovered they'd been planning this for years, long before Robert got sick. They'd taken out life insurance policies on me. Yes, you read that right, with themselves as beneficiaries. They'd forged documents. They'd created email accounts in my name to send messages to distant relatives claiming I was losing my memory and saying strange things, laying groundwork for their incompetency claim. Every piece of evidence was methodically catalogued, notarized, and prepared for what I now knew would be a very public reckoning. My granddaughter Emily's engagement party was announced 3 weeks after my legal victory. Emily was Jennifer's daughter, 26 years old, sweet but thoroughly indoctrinated in her mother's values of appearance over substance, money over meaning. I'd always loved her, but I'd also always known that Jennifer had raised her to see me as a burden, an embarrassing relic to be tolerated at holidays and forgotten the rest of the year. The engagement party was to be a massive affair, 200 guests, held at the prestigious Riverside Country Club, with a price tag that made me dizzy when Rebecca showed me the invoice Marcus had paid using money stolen from my trust. They were inviting everyone who mattered in their social circle. Business associates, wealthy friends, influential connections. It was designed to be a display of their success, their status, their arrival into the upper echelons of society. It would be perfect. I sent my RSVP through John Morrison's office. Eleanor Wright accepts with pleasure. Jennifer called me within an hour, her voice dripping with false sweetness that now sounded to my ears like poison masquerading as honey. Mother, what a surprise. We didn't think you'd be well enough to attend. I'm feeling much better now, I said, keeping my voice light, friendly, unsuspecting. I wouldn't miss Emily's special day for anything. There was a pause, and I could practically hear the calculations running through her head. Should they uninvite me? But that would raise questions. Should they try to control me? But they had no legal authority anymore. Should they cancel the party? But deposits were non-refundable, and their pride wouldn't allow them to look like they were running scared. Of course, Jennifer finally said, her voice tight. We're looking forward to seeing you. Liar. But then again, so was I. The weeks leading up to the party were spent in careful preparation. John Morrison prepared a legal packet for each guest, to be distributed after my speech. Rebecca compiled a multimedia presentation, complete with bank statements, forged documents, and yes, those devastating text messages blown up to poster size. We consulted with the district attorney's office, ensuring that my public reveal wouldn't compromise their criminal case. In fact, they were enthusiastic about it, seeing it as additional evidence of my mental competency. I bought a dress for the occasion, the first new dress I'd purchased in 5 years. Deep blue, elegant, the kind of dress that commanded respect rather than pity. I had my hair done properly, not the desperate hack job I'd been giving myself with bathroom scissors during my time under the bridge. I looked in the mirror the morning of the party and saw someone I'd almost forgotten existed. Eleanor Wright, not as a victim, not as a ghost, but as a woman who'd survived and was about to reclaim her voice. The Riverside Country Club was everything I expected. Pristine, expensive, designed to impress and intimidate. I arrived early before most guests, and watched as Marcus and Jennifer greeted arrivals with practiced smiles and gracious air kisses, performing their roles as successful, devoted family members. They saw me enter and their smiles flickered like faulty light bulbs. Marcus approached first. His hand extended in a gesture that might have fooled observers but didn't fool me. His handshake was the grip of a man trying to assert dominance, trying to remind me of his power. Mom, you're looking, well, aren't I? I smiled back, sweet as the champagne being poured at the bar. It's amazing what proper rest and legal representation can do for one's health. His eyes narrowed slightly, but before he could respond, other guests swept in, requiring his attention. I made my way through the crowd, greeting old friends who looked surprised and delighted to see me, many expressing confusion because they'd been told I was unwell or in care. I smiled and said nothing substantial, saving my words for when they'd matter most. Emily looked beautiful in her white dress, her fiancé attentive at her side. When she saw me, genuine happiness lit her face, perhaps the only genuine emotion in the room besides my own carefully banked rage. Grandma, you came. She hugged me, and for a moment, I felt a pang of regret for what I was about to do. Emily wasn't guilty of her parents' crimes. But she'd been raised on stolen money, educated with embezzled funds, and this party itself was being paid for with assets they'd fraudulently taken from me. The truth needed to be told, even if it stained her special day. I wouldn't have missed it, sweetheart, I said, holding her tight. I have something special planned. The speeches were scheduled for after dinner, during dessert. Marcus was slated to go first, then Jennifer, then the groom's father. I'd arranged with the event coordinator, a woman who happened to have her own elderly mother and was appalled when I quietly explained my situation, to add my name to the speaker list right after Jennifer. Dinner was a blur of prime rib and roasted vegetables that tasted like cardboard in my mouth. My stomach was a knot of anticipation and righteous fury, twisted so tight I could barely swallow. The champagne in my glass remained untouched, though I held it as a prop, a crystalline symbol of the excess built on my suffering. Finally the speeches began. Marcus went first, telling charming lies about being a devoted father, about family values, about building a legacy. Every word was ash in my ears, but I kept my face neutral, pleasant, the mask I'd perfected over decades of swallowing pain. Jennifer followed, her voice trembling with performed emotion as she spoke about Emily's childhood, about being a mother, about the importance of family bonds. She even mentioned me briefly. And of course, we're so glad my mother could be here tonight, despite her recent health challenges. Recent health challenges. That's what 4 months under a bridge was called in her world. That's how casually she dismissed nearly killing me. Then it was my turn. The event coordinator announced my name. A surprised murmur rippled through the crowd. I hadn't been on the printed program. Marcus and Jennifer's faces drained of color, suddenly recognizing the trap they'd walked into, but too late and too public to escape. To stop me now would raise too many questions, create too much scene. Their only option was to sit frozen in their seats and hope I would keep it brief and bland. I wouldn't. I stood, smoothed my blue dress, and walked to the microphone with steady steps, my heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to detonation. Behind me, Rebecca quietly dimmed the lights and fired up the projector, ready to display the evidence on the massive screen that had been showing Emily and her fiancé's engagement photos. And that's how I found myself here at this microphone, champagne flute trembling in my hand, not from fear but from the sheer force of the justice about to be unleashed, looking out at 200 faces and my children's growing horror. Thank you all for being here tonight. I began, my voice steady despite the earthquake of emotion threatening to crack it. I'm Eleanor Wright, mother of the hosts of this beautiful party, grandmother to the lovely bride-to-be. Many of you know me, though some of you might have heard I was unwell, or in a facility, or suffering from dementia. I'm here tonight to set the record straight about a lot of things. I paused, taking a breath that felt like it contained all 70 years of my life, all the silences I'd swallowed, all the words I'd been too afraid or too kind to speak. 4 months ago, my children had me declared mentally incompetent by a doctor who spent 17 minutes with me and was paid handsomely for his diagnosis. They stripped me of my legal rights, took control of my finances, sold my house, and told everyone I was being cared for. What they didn't tell you is that I spent 4 months living under the Morrison Street Bridge, homeless, while they spent the money they'd stolen from me on boats and vacation condos and parties like this one. The room went completely silent. Jennifer made a small sound, half gasp, half whimper. Marcus started to stand, but John Morrison, positioned strategically nearby, placed a firm hand on his shoulder and said something quiet that made him sink back down. My late husband Robert knew this would happen. Years before he died, he discovered our children were embezzling from him. He documented everything. He created an irrevocable trust to protect me. He left me evidence of their plans to steal from me, manipulate me, and ultimately dispose of me. And everything he feared came true except for one thing. He gave me the tools to fight back. Behind me, the screen lit up with the first text message, enlarged so everyone in the room could read. Mom's completely clueless. Once Dad's gone, we can easily get her declared incompetent. Gasps erupted across the room. People pulled out phones, some to film, others to frantically text the news to those not present. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock and betrayal as she looked at her mother. I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. For the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you what real family values look like in the Marcus and Jennifer Wright household. I'm going to show you the text messages where they celebrated my homelessness. The financial records showing they've embezzled over $400,000. The forged documents. The life insurance policies they took out on me, hoping I'd die quickly. The screen cycled through image after image. Bank statements showing transfers of my money to their accounts, credit card bills for luxury purchases, the damning emails where Jennifer called me a burden and Marcus joked about putting the old lady out to pasture. But the worst, the image that I let hang on the screen for a full minute while the room absorbed its cruelty, was Jennifer's email. At least once we get the money, we can put her somewhere and forget about her. She'll probably die within a year anyway. Old people do when they're put in homes. Nature's way of cleaning up. Someone in the back of the room shouted, "Oh my God!" Another voice said, "I'm calling the police." Emily was openly crying now, her fiancé holding her as she stared at her mother with a look of devastated betrayal that I recognized because I'd worn it myself 4 months ago. Marcus tried one last time to interrupt, standing up and yelling, "This is insane. She's not in her right mind. This is all fabricated." I finished for him, my voice cutting through his protests like a blade through butter. "That's what you told everyone about me, wasn't it? That I was confused, making things up, paranoid. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that everything I'm showing you tonight has been verified by forensic accountants, reviewed by the district attorney's office, and will be presented as evidence in the criminal trial that begins next month. My children are being charged with elder abuse, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The evidence isn't fabricated, but their love for me certainly was." Jennifer broke. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and fled the ballroom, her heels clicking frantically as she ran. Marcus sat frozen, his face white as the tablecloths, staring at the screen like a man watching his own execution. Several guests stood and followed Jennifer out, some in support but most, I suspected, to distance themselves from the scandal. Others stayed, riveted, unable to look away from the spectacular implosion of the Wright family's carefully constructed facade. I wasn't quite done. The house they sold, still legally mine, the sale was fraudulent. The trust they claimed to control, never theirs to touch. The money they've spent, they'll be repaying every penny, with interest, as part of their restitution. And this party, this beautiful event celebrating young love and new beginnings, funded entirely with stolen money. Emily, sweetheart, I'm sorry your special day is being tainted by this, but you deserve to know the truth about who your parents really are and what they're capable of. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face, and in that moment I saw something shift in her eyes. The shattering of illusions, yes, but also the beginning of understanding, of moral clarity that her mother had never instilled. "I'm 70 years old," I said, my voice softening slightly. "I've spent most of my life being invisible, being quiet, being convenient. I raised 2 children who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with a pulse. I survived 4 months on the streets because they decided my existence was worth less than their greed. But I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I want every person in this room to go home tonight and call your elderly parents, your aging relatives, your grandparents. Tell them you love them. Ask them if they're okay. Make sure no one is taking advantage of them. Because elder abuse is an epidemic in this country. And it usually comes from the people who should love us most." I set down the microphone with a gentle thunk that echoed through the silent ballroom. John Morrison stood, along with Rebecca and 2 police detectives who'd been waiting in the wings. They approached Marcus's table with official papers and grim expressions. As I walked off the small stage, several guests approached me. Mrs. Chen, a woman I'd known for 30 years, hugged me tightly and whispered, "I always knew something was wrong. I should have checked on you. I'm so sorry." Others echoed similar sentiments, their guilt and sympathy washing over me in waves I hadn't expected. But the most meaningful moment came from Emily herself, who broke away from her fiancé and ran to me, throwing her arms around my neck like she had when she was a little girl. "Grandma, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Mom told me you were in a memory care facility, that you were happy there. I should have visited, I should have checked, I'm so sorry." I held her close, feeling her body shake with sobs. "You couldn't have known, sweetheart. They're very good liars. They fooled me for years too." "I don't want their money," she said fiercely, pulling back to look at me with red-rimmed but determined eyes. "Whatever they were going to give me for the wedding, for my future, I don't want it. It's blood money." "Then we'll start fresh," I told her. "You and me. The right way." The aftermath of that night rippled out like concentric circles from a stone thrown in still water. By morning the video, Yes, several guests had filmed it and posted it online, had gone viral. The hashtag Justice for Eleanor trended for 3 days. News outlets picked up the story. I gave exactly one interview to a local reporter who'd been covering elder abuse cases for years, and then I retreated from the spotlight. Marcus and Jennifer's world collapsed with spectacular completeness. Marcus's business partners, learning about the embezzlement and fraud charges, forced him out of the firm he'd spent 20 years building. Jennifer lost her position on several charity boards. The irony of being expelled from charity work for exploiting her own mother wasn't lost on anyone. Their friends, their social circle, the network they'd cultivated so carefully, evaporated overnight. No one wanted to be associated with elder abusers, especially ones foolish enough to get caught so spectacularly. The criminal trial was swift. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the PR nightmare of fighting charges after that very public exposure, both pled guilty to reduced charges. Marcus received 18 months in federal prison for elder abuse and fraud. Jennifer received 15 months. Both were ordered to pay full restitution of $427,000, plus legal fees and damages. Both lost their professional licenses. Marcus as a financial advisor, Jennifer as a real estate agent. But the real punishment, the one that satisfied me more than any prison sentence, was the social death they suffered. In the circles they'd so desperately wanted to be part of, they were now pariahs. Their names became synonymous with greed and cruelty. Former friends crossed the street to avoid them. Invitations dried up. Phone calls went unreturned. They'd wanted to erase me. Instead, they'd erased themselves. As for me, I didn't return to my old house. It held too many ghosts, too many memories of the woman I'd been when I was still blind to their true natures. John Morrison helped me sell it, and I used the proceeds to buy a smaller place near the coast, a cottage with a garden and a view of the ocean, where I could finally hear myself think without the weight of their expectations crushing down on me. I also did something I'd never done in my entire life. I put myself first. I took art classes, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I volunteered at a homeless shelter because I knew intimately what it meant to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be treated as less than human. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with over the years, and I made new ones who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. Emily and I grew closer than we'd ever been. She postponed her wedding for a year, needing time to process the revelation about her parents, but when she finally did marry, I was there in the front row, and she asked me to do a reading during the ceremony. "Because you taught me what real strength looks like," she said. I testified at hearings about elder abuse reform, sharing my story to help push through stronger protections and penalties. If my nightmare could prevent even one other elderly person from suffering the same betrayal, then perhaps it had meaning beyond my own justice. But late at night, when the ocean wind rattles my windows and sleep eludes me, I still think about those 4 months under the bridge. I think about the cold concrete against my back, the fear that this was how my story would end, the crushing loneliness of being erased by your own children. I think about reading those text messages in the storage unit, about the sound my heart made when it finally accepted what my mind had been refusing to see. And I think about standing at that microphone, my voice steady, my evidence irrefutable, watching their faces crumble as their carefully constructed lies fell apart. The weight of that moment, the catharsis of finally being heard after a lifetime of being silenced, was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't vengeful pleasure. I'm not cruel enough to enjoy others' suffering, even theirs. It was something deeper. Vindication, reclamation, the restoration of my voice and my dignity. I won't lie and say I've forgiven them. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't always noble, and it certainly isn't required. Some betrayals are too deep, cut too close to the bone, poison too many memories. I don't wish them ill, I'm past that. But I also don't wish them well. I simply wish them away from my life, which they now are, permanently. What I learned through those dark months and the bright justice that followed, is that invisibility can be a weapon. They thought ignoring me made me powerless. They were wrong. Being overlooked meant they got sloppy, careless, confident. They never imagined the ghost they'd created could come back to haunt them. I learned that strength doesn't always announce itself with noise and dramatics. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, methodical. The strength of someone who's been knocked down 70 years worth of times and learned how to get back up. The strength of knowing when to stay silent and when to speak, when to appear weak and when to strike. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late. Never too late to fight back, to reclaim your dignity, to refuse to be erased. At 68 years old, broke and homeless, I could have given up. I could have accepted their narrative that I was used up, worn out, irrelevant. Instead, I proved that age brings not weakness but wisdom, not fragility but perspective, not helplessness but hard-won resilience that young people with their easy confidence haven't had to develop yet. The judge at their sentencing said something that stayed with me. She looked at Marcus and Jennifer and said, "You treated your mother as if she was disposable. You forgot that she was once young and strong, that she sacrificed her youth to raise you, that every comfort you enjoyed was built on her invisible labor. You saw an elderly woman and assumed she was defenseless. That was your fatal miscalculation. Mrs. Wright proved that underestimating our elders is done at our own peril. So here I am, in my little cottage by the sea, tending my garden and painting watercolors and living a life that's finally, beautifully mine. The champagne flute from that night sits on my mantel, a gift from Emily, engraved with the date. I look at it sometimes and remember the weight of it in my hand, the trembling that wasn't fear but anticipation, the moment before everything changed. I'm often asked if I would have done anything differently. The answer is yes. I would have fought back sooner. I would have trusted my instincts about their cruelty instead of making excuses for them. I would have valued myself enough to recognize abuse when it was happening instead of normalizing it as family dysfunction. But I can't change the past. I can only own the present and shape the future. And my future, for however many years I have left, will be lived on my terms, not as someone's convenient asset or inconvenient burden, but as Eleanor Wright, fully visible, fully valued, fully alive. There's a particular kind of freedom that comes from having nothing left to lose. When you've already survived the worst betrayal imaginable, when you've already lived through your children wishing you dead, when you've already slept on concrete and eaten from donation boxes, what else can the world possibly do to you? That rock-bottom experience, as horrifying as it was, gave me a strange gift. Fearlessness. I use that fearlessness now in ways both small and profound. I speak up when I see injustice. I don't tolerate disrespect from anyone, regardless of their age or authority. I've become the kind of old woman I used to admire from afar but was too timid to emulate. The kind who says what she thinks, who doesn't apologize for taking up space, who refuses to shrink herself to make others comfortable. My story spread further than I ever anticipated. I receive letters, actual handwritten letters, from elderly people all over the country who saw the video or read the articles. Many share their own stories of being exploited by family members. Some are still trapped in situations they don't know how to escape. I try to respond to each one, offering whatever guidance or resources I can, connecting them with legal aid organizations and elder advocacy groups. One letter in particular haunts me still. It was from a 73-year-old man named William, whose daughter had isolated him from friends and family, convinced him to sign over his house, and then abandoned him in a substandard nursing home while she sold off his possessions. He wrote, "Your courage gave me courage. I contacted a lawyer. I'm fighting back. At my age, I thought it was too late to matter. You proved it's never too late to matter." William won his case. His daughter was charged. He moved into a veterans community where he's thriving. He sends me photos sometimes. Him playing chess, him at a barbecue, him smiling with new friends. Each photo is a small victory, a life reclaimed, a person who refused to be erased. These connections, these ripples from my story, have given my suffering a purpose I never expected. I'm not glad it happened. I wouldn't wish this kind of betrayal on anyone. But since it did happen, since I survived it, I can at least ensure it means something beyond my own justice. The thing about betrayal by your own children that people who haven't experienced it can't quite grasp is how it rewrites your entire history. Every memory becomes suspect. Every "I love you" becomes questionable. Were they ever sincere? Or was I always just a means to an end? Did Marcus really enjoy our father-son fishing trips? Or was he just going through the motions, waiting for the payoff? Did Jennifer mean it when she called me her best friend during her divorce? Or was she already calculating how to manipulate my sympathy? I've spent countless hours in therapy. Yes, at 70 years old, I finally sought the mental health support I should have gotten decades ago, working through these questions. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen from the party, helped me understand that I'll never have definitive answers. The past is gone, and with it, the opportunity to know what was real. But, she told me during one session, you get to decide what meaning you give your experiences. You can let their betrayal poison every good memory, or you can accept that even if their love was imperfect or transactional, the work you did raising them still had value. You loved them authentically, even if they didn't return it. That authenticity is yours. They can't steal it retroactively. It's a work in progress, reclaiming my memories. Some days are easier than others. I've learned to hold two truths simultaneously. I was a good mother who did her best, and my best wasn't enough to make them good people. Those aren't contradictory statements. Children aren't simply blank slates that parents write on. They have their own natures, their own choices, their own moral compasses that can point true north or drift toward corruption regardless of how they were raised. Robert's sister, Aunt Margaret, reached out to me 6 months after the trial. She's 81 now, sharp as ever, and she had things to say. I always knew they were rotten, she told me bluntly over tea in my cottage. Robert knew too, though it broke his heart. We had a conversation shortly before he died. He cried, Eleanor. I'd never seen my brother cry, not even at our parents' funerals. But he cried about Marcus and Jennifer. He said, I don't know where we went wrong, but somewhere along the way we raised parasites instead of people. The revelation that Robert had known, had seen, had tried to protect me even in death, brought both comfort and renewed grief. Comfort because I hadn't been foolish or blind. They'd simply been good at hiding their true natures. Grief because Robert had died carrying that terrible knowledge, unable to fully share it with me because he hoped perhaps that he was wrong. Margaret stayed for a week, and during that time she filled in gaps in my understanding. She told me about conversations she'd overheard at family gatherings, little cruelties she'd witnessed that I'd been too busy serving and cleaning to notice. She told me about the time Jennifer, at age 16, had said to her cousin, I can't wait until Mom's old and helpless. Then she'll finally appreciate how much work it is to take care of someone. Even at 16, the seed was planted. The view of parents as burdens, as obligations, as future problems to be managed rather than people to be loved. You couldn't have changed them, Margaret said firmly. Some people are born with an empathy deficiency. You could have been perfect, and Eleanor, you were damn close, and they still would have turned out selfish and cruel. It's not your fault. Intellectually, I know she's right. Emotionally, I'm still working on believing it. The financial restitution came through in stages, as Marcus and Jennifer sold assets and set up payment plans for amounts they couldn't cover immediately. The boat went first, sold at a loss because Marcus was desperate. Jennifer's Aspen condo never closed. The deal fell through when her fraud charges became public and the seller backed out. She lost her deposit. Watching them scramble to scrape together money they'd stolen and spent with such casual arrogance was satisfying in a way that surprised me. I'm not naturally vindictive. I don't enjoy others suffering as a rule. But there was a kind of cosmic justice in seeing them experience even a fraction of the financial desperation they'd forced on me. The money, when it came, was less important than the principle. I was already financially secure thanks to Robert's trust and the sale of the house. I took a portion of the restitution and donated it to homeless shelters and elder advocacy organizations. The rest I invested for Emily's future and for any other grandchildren who might need it, though I've made it abundantly clear in my updated will that Marcus and Jennifer get nothing, not one penny, not now and not ever. My attorney suggested I might face pushback on that, family members claiming I was being vindictive or that everyone deserves forgiveness. I told him, Let them try. I have 4 months of sleeping under a bridge as evidence that I don't owe my abusers anything, especially not money they tried to steal in the first place. He smiled. I'll make sure the will is ironclad. It is. I've learned from watching my children's schemes how to protect assets, how to anticipate manipulation, how to build legal walls they can't scale. If they somehow, miraculously, genuinely reformed and became different people, that still wouldn't entitle them to my forgiveness or my money. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Some relationships, once poisoned, can't be healed. And I'm okay with that. I've let go of the fantasy of a reconciled family, tearful apologies, a Hollywood ending where love conquers all and everyone learns valuable lessons. Real life doesn't work that way. Real abuse has permanent consequences. Real betrayal leaves scars that don't fade just because time passes. What I have instead is peace. Not the peace of resolution but the peace of acceptance. They are who they are. I am who I am. Those two realities are incompatible. I've chosen myself, my well-being, my dignity. And that choice, made daily, is its own form of love. Self-love, which I'm learning is just as valid and important as the maternal love I wasted on unworthy recipients. Emily's wedding, when it finally happened, was small and intimate, the opposite of the extravagant engagement party. She'd learned something from that disaster. That love doesn't need spectacle, that meaning isn't measured in price tags, that the people who matter will show up in a backyard just as readily as a ballroom. I walked her down the aisle. She'd asked me specifically, explaining that while she loved her father, she couldn't reconcile the man she thought he was with the man he'd proven to be. You're the one who showed me what integrity looks like, she said. I want you beside me when I make my vows. It was one of the proudest moments of my life. Standing there in a simple garden, Emily's hand on my arm, the afternoon sun making everything golden and possible, I felt a sense of rightness I hadn't felt in years. This was what family should be. Chosen, mutual, based on respect and genuine affection rather than obligation or blood relation. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. No ice sculptures or string quartets or elaborate floral arrangements. Just love witnessed by 50 people who actually cared. When Emily and her husband exchanged vows, promising to value each other, to stay faithful not just to each other but to their own principles, I cried. Not sad tears but tears of hope. Hope that this younger generation might learn from our mistakes, might build healthier relationships, might understand that love is a verb, not a noun, something you do, not something you claim. At the reception, a casual affair with barbecue and homemade desserts, Emily asked me to give a toast. I hadn't prepared anything, but I stood with my glass of sparkling cider. I still can't drink champagne without remembering that night at the country club, and spoke from the heart. When I was young, I thought family was everything. I built my entire identity around being a mother, a wife, a caretaker. I sacrificed my dreams, my ambitions, my sense of self because I believed that's what love required. And maybe sometimes it does require sacrifice. But what I learned too late is that real love, the kind worth having, is reciprocal. It doesn't drain you until you're empty. It doesn't take and take and take until there's nothing left but a hollow shell. I looked at Emily, at her husband, at the gathered friends and distant relatives who'd proven themselves trustworthy. Love honors the giver as much as the recipient. Love sees you, values you, protects you. And if you ever find yourself in a relationship, with a partner, a friend, even a family member, where you're consistently invisible, consistently exploited, consistently hurt, please know that leaving isn't failure. Protecting yourself isn't selfishness. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. The room was silent when I finished, many people wiping away tears. Emily came and hugged me, whispering, "Thank you for teaching me that. Thank you for being brave enough to save yourself." That moment, more than the courtroom victory or the viral video or even the financial restitution, felt like the real triumph. I'd taken my pain and turned it into wisdom that might protect someone else. I transformed victimhood into survivorship, survivorship into advocacy, advocacy into genuine healing. The years since that engagement party disaster have been, paradoxically, some of the happiest of my life. Is that strange to say? That I'm happier at 71, living alone in a small cottage, estranged from my children, than I was at 45 with a husband and kids and a big house in the suburbs. But it's true. Because this happiness is mine. It's not borrowed, not performed for others' benefit, not contingent on making myself smaller or quieter or more convenient. This is the happiness of authenticity, of living aligned with my values, of finally putting myself first after 7 decades of putting everyone else ahead of me. I paint in the mornings, watercolors of the coastline, still not very good but improving. I volunteer at the shelter 3 afternoons a week, serving meals and connecting people with resources. I've joined a book club full of opinionated women who've also survived various betrayals and losses. We call ourselves the Phoenix Club, risen from the ashes of our old lives. I date occasionally, though at my age dating means coffee and companionship more than romance. There's a widower named Frank who makes me laugh and doesn't expect anything from me except my company. We go to movies, take walks, share meals. It's uncomplicated in a way my marriage never was, probably because neither of us needs anything from the other. We're just 2 old people who enjoy not being alone sometimes. My health is good, better than it has any right to be after those 4 months of exposure and stress and poor nutrition. R. Patel, my physician, calls me his medical miracle. My blood pressure is perfect, my cholesterol is controlled, my cognitive function is excellent. Take that, Dar. Rashid, and your fraudulent 17-minute evaluation. I walk 3 miles most mornings, breathing in salt air and feeling grateful for my body that's carried me through 7 decades of life, including the hardest 4 months. Sometimes I run into people who knew Marcus and Jennifer in their before lives, when they were riding high on stolen money and false pretenses. These encounters are awkward but increasingly rare. Most people, when they recognize me, are kind. They apologize for not seeing what was happening, for believing the lies about my supposed dementia, for not checking on me. I tell them the same thing every time. You couldn't have known. They were very convincing. But privately, I do wish someone had checked. I wish Mrs. Chen had trusted her instincts. I wish my old bridge club friends had questioned why they suddenly couldn't reach me. I wish the neighbors in my old house had thought it strange that I disappeared overnight. But wishing doesn't change what happened, and I've learned to let go of the what-ifs and if-onlys that can poison a survivor's peace. The Marcus and Jennifer I hear about now, through the grapevine and occasional Google searches I'm not proud of but also won't apologize for, are shadows of their former selves. Marcus works in retail, having lost his financial credentials. Jennifer cleans houses, the irony of which isn't lost on me. She's now doing the kind of invisible labor she always dismissed when I did it. They're divorced from their respective spouses, both relationships collapsing under the weight of shame and financial ruin. Part of me wishes I could say I feel sympathy for them. That would be the magnanimous, evolved thing to claim. But I don't. Feel nothing. They're strangers who happen to share my DNA, people who made choices and are living with consequences. Their suffering doesn't bring me joy, but it doesn't bring me sadness either. I'm simply neutral, which might be the healthiest emotional state I could have reached. They've never apologized. Not once. Not in court-mandated letters. Not through intermediaries. Not in any form. Their lawyer read a prepared statement at sentencing about regret and poor judgment, but those words came from legal counsel trying to minimize prison time, not from genuine remorse. If I waited for their apology, I'd still be waiting, still giving them power over my emotional state, still trapped in the role of victim hoping for acknowledgement that will never come. So I don't wait. I don't hope. I don't check my mailbox expecting a letter that will never arrive. I've accepted that some people are fundamentally incapable of recognizing the harm they cause, let alone taking responsibility for it. That's their deficiency, not mine. Their inability to apologize doesn't diminish the validity of my pain or the righteousness of my anger. Emily asks sometimes if I think they'll ever change, ever wake up and realize what they lost. I tell her honestly, I don't know and I don't care. My peace can't be dependent on their redemption. I can't spend my remaining years, however many I have left, hoping that someday they'll become the people I once believed them to be. That hope would be another form of prison. Instead, I focus on what I can control. My choices, my responses, my life. I focus on being the grandmother Emily deserves, the volunteer the shelter needs, the friend my Phoenix Club sisters value. I focus on painting mediocre watercolors and reading challenging books and walking my 3 miles and eating meals I actually enjoy instead of whatever's cheapest or easiest. This is what victory looks like in real life. Not dramatic, not cinematic, not tied up with a neat bow. Just a quiet, persistent choosing of yourself, day after day, moment by moment, breath by breath. The other night, I had a dream about being back under the Morrison Street Bridge. In the dream, I was younger, maybe 40, and I was terrified, convinced this was my permanent fate. But then my 71-year-old self appeared, exactly as I am now, wrinkled and gray-haired and strong, and reached out a hand. "This isn't forever," dream me said to dream younger me. "This is just one chapter. A horrible chapter, but not the ending. You survive this. You more than survive. You triumph." I woke up crying, but they were good tears. Healing tears. The kind that wash away old poison and make room for new growth. That's what I want people to understand about surviving betrayal, especially betrayal by family, especially when you're older and supposedly past the age of resilience. It's not about bouncing back to who you were before. That person is gone, killed by the betrayal, buried under the bridge alongside those 4 cold months. You don't get her back, but you get someone new. Someone harder in some ways, softer in others. Someone who knows exactly what she's capable of surviving, which makes her fearless in unexpected ways. Someone who's looked at the worst humans can do to each other and decided to be better anyway. I am not the woman I was before. I'm someone better. Tested, refined, stripped of illusions, rebuilt on a foundation of self-respect instead of others' approval. The betrayal didn't destroy me, transformed me. And yes, I would have preferred a gentler transformation, one that didn't require sleeping on concrete and eating from donation boxes. But we don't get to choose our crucibles. We only get to choose how we emerge from them. I chose to emerge with my dignity intact, my voice reclaimed, my sense of self restored. I chose justice over silence, confrontation over comfortable lies, my own well-being over their convenience. Those choices saved my life in ways that have nothing to do with physical survival and everything to do with spiritual resurrection. So when people ask me, as they often do, whether I regret how I handled things, whether I should have been quieter, more private, more forgiving, I tell them this: I regret staying silent for so long. I regret making myself small and invisible and convenient for people who saw that as weakness to exploit. I regret not valuing myself enough to fight back sooner. But I don't regret fighting back when I finally did. I don't regret the public exposure, the viral video, the spectacular destruction of their false image. They earned every second of that humiliation through years of calculated cruelty. And if my public stand helped even one other elderly person find the courage to report abuse, to seek help, to refuse to be erased, then it was worth every uncomfortable moment. This is my story. Not the story they would tell, where I'm the vengeful, bitter old woman who couldn't forgive. Not the story our society prefers, where the elderly are saintly and passive and grateful for any scraps of attention. But my story, the true one, messy and painful and ultimately triumphant. I lived 68 years trying to be the person everyone else needed me to be. I'm spending my remaining years being exactly who I am. Complicated, imperfect, scarred but unbroken, angry but also joyful, damaged but also healing, invisible no more. And you know what? That's enough. I'm enough. Always was, though it took a bridge and a betrayal and a courtroom and a viral video to finally believe it. Now I'm asking you, whoever you are reading this or listening to this story. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved, someone who was supposed to protect you? Have you ever felt invisible in your own family, your own life? Have you ever stayed silent about abuse because speaking up seemed too hard, too risky, too likely to be dismissed? And if you have, if any part of my story resonates with your own pain, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to keep accepting crumbs and calling it love? Are you going to keep making yourself small so others can feel big? Or are you going to find your voice, claim your worth, demand the respect and dignity you deserve? Because here's what I learned at 68 years old. Homeless under a bridge, reading text messages where my children celebrated my disappearance. It's never too late. Never too late to fight back, to speak up, to save yourself. Never too late to matter. You matter. Your story matters. Your pain is valid, your anger is justified, your desire for justice is righteous. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Don't let anyone tell you to be grateful for abuse or call you bitter for refusing to forgive the unforgivable. Don't let anyone make you invisible. See you. Believe you. And I'm telling you, fight back. You deserve better. And you're stronger than you think. Thank you for listening to my story all the way through. This was my truth. Every word of it real, pulled from the hardest months of my life and the strongest transformation I've ever experienced. These are stories of real people who faced extreme situations and found the strength to move forward. If this story touched you in any way, please subscribe to the channel. I share real stories of survival, justice, and triumph every week here. And tell me in the comments, have you lived through something similar? What would you have done in my place? I love reading your stories too. Click on the videos showing on your screen now for more emotional stories that will make you reflect. Until the next story.